They believed it completely. The lie wasn't told to investors or customers, it was whispered to themselves every morning until it became gospel truth. And by the time you understand which lie I'm talking about, you'll realize why every empire built on it collapses exactly the same way. Because the $1 billion was real, the company was real. Only the reason it worked, the story they told themselves about why, that was fiction. Every founder starts with a story. Not the pitch they give investors, the private one, the narrative that explains why they'll succeed where others failed. And that story feels true because it has to be. You can't sacrifice everything, risk everything, without a narrative that makes the sacrifice meaningful somehow. Then the early wins arrive, small ones, customers who choose you, investors who believe, employees who join despite the risk and uncertainty ahead. And each win reinforces the story, makes it more real, transforms the narrative from hopeful fiction into something that feels like discovered truth finally. Here's where the lie becomes dangerous. When success arrives, you have to explain it. And humans always explain success the same way consistently. They attribute it to the things they controlled, their vision, their determination, their unique insight. Never the timing, luck, or circumstances they couldn't see. And here's the lie specifically. We succeeded because we're fundamentally different, better, smarter, more committed than everyone who tried and failed before us completely. So they start building around that belief, creating processes that assume their exceptionalism, making bets that only make sense if the story is literally true. They hire people who reflect the narrative back, who believe the mythology, who wouldn't challenge whether success came from skill or circumstances they couldn't control. The numbers keep working for now. Revenue grows, expansion succeeds. Every quarter provides new evidence that the lie is actually truth, that they cracked something. They get invited to share their secrets, and in teaching others their formula, they become even more certain of it. Repetition transforms hypothesis into doctrine gradually. Some write books about it, locking themselves into a public version of the lie, making it impossible to later admit they never understood why it worked. There's a moment that happens. A competitor fails. Someone who started the same time, similar resources, similar market, and they analyze why that company died. They identify everything that company did wrong, every strategic mistake, every leadership failure, everything that proves their own success wasn't random, but earned through superiority. And maybe for a moment, they wonder about luck, about timing, about the 1,000 invisible factors that separate success from failure beyond anyone's control. But they edit that part out, because acknowledging randomness would mean admitting their empire might be built on circumstances, not genius, and that's psychologically impossible to accept. So they expand aggressively. Acquisitions that make sense only if the original story is true, if their methodology actually transfers to different markets flawlessly. They enter new markets using the same formula. Because if you succeeded because of internal excellence, that excellence should work everywhere. The logic feels airtight. New divisions, new product lines, new initiatives, each one betting that the original success wasn't circumstantial, that they've discovered something universally applicable and permanent. The spending accelerates because frugality feels unnecessary. When you believe you're exceptional, when results prove it, conservatism looks like doubt, like not believing your own story. They take on debt, significant debt, not recklessly by their own logic. Rationally, if you assume the narrative is true, and future performance is controllable completely. Employee compensation gets tied to stock price, everyone's wealth depending on the continued validation of the story, creating an organization with zero incentive to question it. Customer promises escalate too, guarantees about service, timelines that are aggressive but achievable if you're actually as good as you claim to be, constantly. Major partnerships get signed. companies putting their trust and capital behind the story. Because from the outside, the evidence all points the same direction persuasively. And for a moment, at the peak, the lie and reality become indistinguishable. The company is worth billions. The story must be true. Markets are efficient. The first crack appears small. Growth slows slightly. Not collapse, not crisis. Just a quarter where the numbers don't quite match the narrative's predictions precisely. And they explain it, convincingly. Market conditions, investment in future growth, strategic decisions that will pay off next quarter, next year, eventually somehow. Internally, they adjust expectations, revise models, but always within the framework that assumes their methodology is sound. That execution just needs refinement, not reconception completely. When someone suggests the original success might have been circumstantial, that maybe market timing mattered more than strategy, they're treated like heretics, speaking obvious nonsense. That person usually leaves, and their departure reinforces the group belief. The weak links remove themselves, the true believers remain. The mythology purifies itself through selection. Then something bigger breaks, the new market fails. Not slowly, definitively. The strategy that worked before doesn't work here, and nobody can explain why convincingly. The board starts asking uncomfortable questions. Not attacking yet, just probing, testing whether the story still explains reality or if reality is diverging from prediction permanently. And the founder faces a choice. Admit the lie, acknowledge that success was part skill, part timing, part luck, rebuild on honest foundation publicly, or double down, defend the narrative more aggressively, attribute the failure to execution, not strategy, to fix what they think went wrong, not what actually went wrong fundamentally. Most choose doubling down, because admitting the lie means admitting everything built on it is unstable. The partnerships, compensation, promises, all suddenly questionable if the foundation was false. So they invest more, reorganize, replace people, doing everything except questioning whether the original story that explained success was actually accurate at all ever. And 6 months pass. The problems compound. More markets struggle. Even the original business shows stress. The formula that worked once refuses to work again consistently. This is where the bitter irony sharpens, because what comes next proves that the lie wasn't just wrong. It was precisely, perfectly, catastrophically backwards, always. Someone finally does the honest analysis. External consultants maybe. They deconstruct the original success, and the truth emerges clearly. It was mostly timing, market conditions, luck at key moments. The strategy mattered, sure, execution mattered, but the reason it worked wasn't their exceptionalism. It was circumstances aligning temporarily, conditions that no longer exist anywhere or ever. And here's the irony. Other companies succeed in the same market using completely different approaches, proving there was no secret formula, just multiple paths that worked under right conditions. The things they thought made them special, their processes and culture, those weren't differentiators, they were just how they happened to operate when conditions were favorable accidentally. Which explains the expansion failures perfectly. They kept applying a methodology that only worked in specific circumstances, circumstances that existed once, briefly, and then disappeared without announcement. And all the bets made assuming exceptionalism, the debt, partnerships, promises, all become unsustainable simultaneously because they were only rational if the lie was true completely. The market figures it out, stock price collapses. Not from scandal, from the simple recognition that the story explaining the company's success was fiction, and fiction doesn't sustain valuations. They try to raise capital. No one's interested, because a pitch requires believing the original story, and everyone now understands that story was always retrospective justification, never predictive truth. Layoffs begin, deep ones. People who joined because they believed the narrative, who took stock instead of salary, who bet on the lie because leadership sold it convincingly. Partners exit agreements. No one wants association. The company that was celebrated as visionary becomes case study in hubris, in believing your own mythology too completely and destructively. The founder eventually admits it, issues a statement acknowledging they misunderstood their own success, that arrogance blinded them, that they should have been more humble about causation. But it's too late. The confession changes nothing. The infrastructure built on the lie can't be unsupported by honesty after it's already collapsing under its own contradictions. The company files for bankruptcy or sells for pennies. A billion-dollar valuation becomes a case study in how narrative disconnected from reality eventually meets physics and loses always. And here's the bitter irony perfected. No one committed fraud, no one lied to investors knowingly. They genuinely believed the lie, which made it more dangerous, not less. The book gets cancelled. No one wants lessons, because the lesson is uncomfortable. That success often comes from circumstances we can't control or replicate or even identify accurately afterward. People watch old interviews, speeches, panels, and every confident statement, every explanation of their secret becomes evidence of delusion, of how completely they believed something objectively false. The people who believed earliest suffer most. They didn't just lose jobs, they lost faith in their own judgment, in their ability to distinguish truth from compelling narrative convincingly. And the founder understands, finally. Success was circumstantial. Failure was inevitable once they built everything on the assumption that circumstances were irrelevant, that they discovered permanent advantage definitively. But the irony continues. Elsewhere, another founder is pitching, explaining why they're different, why their success will be skill-based, not luck-based, building on the same foundational lie. Investors want to believe it, because if success is random, their expertise is illusion, so they fund the mythology again. Different company, same foundational false belief. Business schools will teach it wrong. They'll analyze strategic mistakes, execution failures, missing the core lesson that humans can't objectively analyze their own success in real time accurately. Because the lie is too useful to abandon. I succeeded because I'm exceptional feels better than I succeeded because circumstances aligned temporarily, even when the second is true exclusively. So every successful founder faces the same choice. Build on honest assessment of why things worked, or build on mythology that feels true because success demands explanation satisfying. And the choice matters, because infrastructure built on false foundations eventually meets reality, and reality doesn't negotiate with narratives, no matter how many people believe them collectively. The founders who survive admit uncertainty. They build conservatively. They acknowledge that timing and luck contributed. They don't bet everything on their own exceptionalism being permanent truth. So watch for it. When you start explaining success only through internal factors, when you dismiss competitors' wins as luck, but your wins as skill exclusively, when questions about causation feel like disloyalty, when the narrative becomes so central to identity that challenging it threatens psychological stability, that's when you're believing the lie completely, because the $1 billion doesn't prove the story. It proves that markets will temporarily value mythology, but temporarily is doing heavy work in that sentence, heavier than founders want to acknowledge. The lie that built the illusion was simple. We succeeded because we're exceptional. Therefore, our success is repeatable and controllable. One sentence. Billions in consequences when wrong. And it's always wrong. Not because people aren't exceptional, but because exceptionalism without favorable circumstances is just expensive noise, and circumstances don't care about your narrative at all.